Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the school budget meeting to order, today being March 9th, 2017. A number of items to discuss today. We have a regular meeting following the budget meeting at 7 o'clock. But I'd like to maybe just first to kind of get things started for us. I know Dr. Levine has a presentation. Why don't we turn it over to you, Dr. Levine, you and Ms. Murtag's presentation, and then I'm sure we'll be opening it up for questions.
Thank you very much.
Actually, yeah, why don't we start with if everybody could please rise for Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Mr. Hockman. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you. So now, Dr. Levine, I'd like to turn it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for all the time that you've spent with me and my team in helping to forge this this budget. As you can see, and you've had this for the weekend, I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to read through this before the meeting. We're approximately $2.6 million light in the budget that we've had to make up. Most of that is raises. The opportunity for us to do so has taken two forms. The top section is non-personnel related, which comes to approximately $1.2 million. The bottom section is personnel related and comes to $1.8 million. This is based upon an infusion of $1.5 million from the mayor to help offset the deficit that we had. And we believe that once this budget is set, we will be back on track at zero, meaning we'll be moving forward at a real budget that has no deficit. We'll be tight, we'll be thin in many places, but I think that we will be more close to reality than we've been in quite some time. I would like to say that, and I know that most of the concerns will come from the second piece of this, which is the bottom part, which involves people. I just wanted to very quickly go over a couple of things with you. The money, the $230,000 for K-Paras was a grant. We are not getting that grant. We didn't get it this year, and we were able to, and with your permission, kind of eat that money in the budget this year. That is simply impossible to do next year with the way things look. So I have to offer that up as a cut. 5 high school teachers, most of that will be done through either retirement and not filling the retirement, or reduction in force by 1 in the teaching ranks. It'd actually be a reduction in force by 5, but 4 of that will be done by retirement or an open position not being filled. 10 special ed paras, this has less to do with budget, and it has more to do with restructuring the way that we do business at the Brown School with special education. There will be less of a need for paras because we're going to co-teach. So that is also a cut. 2 guidance positions at the high school. The reduction of 2 guidance positions at the high school is really due to a reduction of over 300 children at the high school, 300 students at the high school. We've gone from approximately 1,850 when I was here 5 years ago to what will probably open up at 1,525 to 1,540 in September of 1917. I was around then too. The department head of guidance, I would like to eliminate that position. Only the school committee can eliminate positions. I would like to eliminate that $4,500 stipend and that position itself. The Higgins phys ed teacher is open right now, and the principal of the middle school and the director of athletics feels that we can live without that by increasing class sizes, which actually the teachers have recommended for next year anyway. They felt that their class sizes were a bit too light. Grade 3 at Brown, grade 5 at Burke, The grade 5 at Burke, most of the elementary positions are also reductions of open, what would be open positions or last in kinds of positions. The grade 3 at Brown and the grade 5 at Burke. The grade 5 at Burke is due to a cut in numbers. We're going from 63 fifth graders at Burke to 41. So we're going from a need of one fewer teacher. 3 teachers, grades 2, 3, and 4 at Carroll. You have the impact statement of what this means every time I make a cut of a teacher. I think that the grade 4 at Carroll is going to be tough to do because it does bump that grade up to 26, but that's a discussion at this table. 2 teachers, grades 2 and 5 at Center, grade 4 at Welch. The elementary position of assistant principal at the Carroll, going from a full-time to a .5, is probably the least favorite of my choices here on this. It's a 600-student school. It has many issues. I just don't believe that that's a realistic cut, but I put it there as a possibility. And a clerical high school at the clerical position of the high school deans. Presently, each dean has his or her own clerical person, and we would cut that by 1. That would be a real person, that would be a real cut, and they would simply have to pool their resources. I am proposing, and you know my philosophy is that even in difficult times we have to move forward. I am proposing with one of the cuts of the guidance positions at the high school to turn that into a K through 12 guidance coordinator. Would be an administrative position. It would be a guidance person who would be responsible for evaluating guidance personnel and moving the guidance department forward. I believe the guidance department needs to move forward. I think it needs a new set of eyes. I think it's a very, very important position to create. I think it's time to do so. High school academic dean, I would ask you to think about, as Mr. Amico has recommended in the past, turning that recommended position into a district-wide curriculum and instruction coordinator to work directly with Kara to get even more done than we're getting done now. No longer can we expect Kara to do the kind of work that she's doing alone. And district-wide library books, $25,000. Some of our libraries are getting tattered and old. I have done my visitations to different schools. The Welch School needs a lot of help in the library. It really needs furniture and books. And some of the other older libraries need an infusion of money as well. So I'm not going to go through every line item on top, but I did want to hit the explanation for some of these things on the bottom. Again, I have cut more than we need to give you some flexibility, and the mayor has some things that I know that he wants to say about the budget, and I'll turn this over to the mayor.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Levine, and certainly it's probably been said by every mayor at every city, but every budget is a challenge. This was the budget that I was warned about when I first became mayor and we moved forward with the Higgins and the vocational school. Was it had been opening up that 2018 was going to be a very challenging year. It's challenging for a number of reasons, but first and foremost is it's at our peak of the borrowing for Higgins and for the vocational school. This year is the peak, and then it starts to go down. But also this year we had a 7.45% increase in health insurance across the board. We had the 2% raises, which are well-deserved by our employees. That was collectively bargained. We had an increase of $600,000 for our students at the Essex Tech, and this is another factor in why this is a kind of a high year. This is the last year where there's a large bump in enrollment for the Essex Tech. We've been averaging the last 3 years about 80 students per incoming class. However, this senior class that's leaving, there's only 30 Peabody students. So this incoming class is going to be freshmen, is going to be 77, which was allowed in. There might be a couple more, might be a couple less, but there were 77 that were approved. So there's that 47 student delta. And then following this, we kind of estimate that it's going to be about 80 students every year going forward. So this will be the last jump in that number. But we're estimating about a $600,000 increase in the money going to Essex Tech. There was an increase this year in our retirement obligations of $500,000, 500 plus actually. And as I mentioned, this is the kind of the peak year for the increase to our debt service because of primarily the Higgins and for our Essex Tech obligations. So certainly it was a challenge before we really got to look at any of the budget numbers. We already had approximately a few $1 million increase before we got to look at the individual departments. So we've been working diligently on the city side and on the school side. I've been having a number of meetings with Dr. Levine, Ms. Mertag, and our school business manager, Jared, just to kind of run through the numbers. So 1.5 was, quite frankly, a little higher than I intended to go. However, it is very important to me to move the educational system forward. I think we've made some great investments over the years. To me, this is probably our most difficult school budget that we've worked on together. I'm hoping that as the years progress, there'll be a little bit more flexibility, but I knew this year would be a difficult year. I do have some suggestions looking at what's being proposed that's up for discussion to potentially be eliminated. I am concerned about the kindergarten paras. I love having paraprofessionals there with our working with our kindergarten students that are beginning their educational journey. Certainly the number 26 at the Carroll School for fourth grade, I believe Dr. Levine was a concern. And also the elementary assistant principal position at the Carroll is another concern. And I have some others as well. I have a couple of ideas that we might be able to bring back some of those, but I certainly want to open it up first to kind of get a flavor of everybody, what all of the members think about this proposal. It's going to be a very difficult year. As I try to do, I try not to throw out a number knowing that I have a lot more in reserve. I don't really like playing that game where I say, oh, I only have $1 million, and then at the end all of a sudden say, oh, I have $1.5 million. I don't really think that's fair as we deliberate. I try to give you the number of where I'm at. It is a little higher than I intended to go, but I don't want to slow down our progress, and I know we have some difficult decisions to make. So there really isn't additional money to be had. This is the 1.5 I am willing to commit to, and I know we have some discussions or some different issues to discuss. As I said, I have some thoughts and ideas, but I want to wait to kind of get some indication from all of you as to what you think and what are some important items for each of you, and I'd like to open it up at this time. Anybody? Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. I have a few different questions. I'll start with the Higgins phys ed teacher. By increasing that class size, are we going over contract? What does that number come out to?
No, we would still be within contract. We could never go over contract.
Right.
I wouldn't recommend it if we did.
Right.
I believe that the class size would average in the 25 range.
Okay. And then in regards to the substitute line item, the reduction 193,000, what did we spend? What are we going to have budgeted for that line? What did we spend this year?
We would have budgeted the same amount of money that we have budgeted this year. We were trying to add $193,000 because we generally overspend that line item. So we were trying to get closer to reality. We just can't do that this year, and we have to hope for a better year next year in the substitute line. So we level funded it.
Okay. And the kindergarten paras, so that's a reduction of all of them. They would all completely be gone. That's a really big number. I don't know, how the rest of this is going to shake out, but I would say at the very least, if we could maybe just do that by half. I think one of the options we could have is to have them come in 2 or 3 days a week just reduce it by half so that those teachers know that they still have an extra staff person on hand for the days that they have the busy project. That's a lot of little kids to manage for one person, but if they know ahead of time that they're still going to get that extra help. I wouldn't like to see it eliminated at all. Just a suggestion of maybe taking one of the positions away, the additional position at 100,000, possibly the library books, make that K-para projected 115 instead, and save some of it. Is there no possibility at all that we're going to get that grant back?
Yeah, Dr. Levine may have some information. It was a grant that was cut by the state. It's not looking very favorable that we would get that again this year. At a meeting, I had a conference, we met with state officials this past week, and the financial outlook was not promising, and so I do not anticipate. And that was difficult. I mean, right off the bat, 230,000, that was cut that, you know, we had, I don't want to say planned for, but we had hoped to continue, because I do think those positions play a valuable role in the development of our kids. So I actually like what you're discussing, and I think that's a discussion we need to continue.
Okay.
Have you heard differently? I'm hearing that it's not likely we're going to get it.
Well, at the Centennial Ball, I asked both Ted and Tom whether or not there was any possibility of getting that back, and, you know, they were both pretty grim.
They were. One other thing, and then I'll yield. The custodial positions, I see where we're reducing the OT district-wide, also reducing the floaters. Doesn't that, how will that work out if we're reducing all of that in our overtime? What did we spend? Do we have the numbers for that for this year?
I think our business manager would be able to pull that up.
How much are we spending on substitute?
Yeah, what is our overtime right now?
Overtime right now, we have budgeted roughly.
Custodial overtime.
Yep.
Custodial.
Custodial overtime right now, we have budgeted roughly 45,000 in the general fund. What happens is a lot of times we have an offset account, so it's brought in through other revenues. So right now, 45,000 is the custodial overtime amount.
And how much have we spent and how much have we offset?
We have an offset in the budget, let me get that line, of roughly $193,000. At this time, it's hard to project exactly if we're going to meet that. I think that we absolutely will meet that, and then any additional monies would offset any overages in the overtime.
And what is the overtime at right now, do you know?
I do not know, but I know that it is not over budget right
It's
now.
not over budget.
So I'm going to get that amount to you.
Well, I would just be looking at, by reducing the two positions, the floater, the custodian floater, the maintenance floater, and the overtime. I'm just trying to figure out how that would play. If you need a few minutes, I'll yield to other members, and then we
Well, I'm
can go
sorry,
back
what was
to
the
it.
question?
He's looking, I just want to know how it's going to play out if we reduce two custodians and our overtime. He's going to look it up. If you want to go to another subject, I can come back.
I think we're only reducing one custodian, and that is we have two custodial floaters. We're reducing that from 2 to 1. And that person those people are generally used for two things. The first custodial floater is used as a substitute for custodians who might be absent. So your point is well taken. The second custodial floater is used to clean buildings like the transportation building and the Kylie. That will be stretched thin, but it won't be completely gone. There will be one floater. Obviously, the biggest responsibility for that one floater will be to fill in where needed when someone is absent. The second responsibility will be the transportation department, the Kylie, or wherever it is that we are at that time. Neither the building that we may move into nor the Kylie demands full-time attention. The transportation department doesn't either. So I think we can make it work, but it would stretch us a little bit. I don't think it will add to the overtime. I just think it will add to the burden. Okay.
So I actually misspoke, my apologies. So our budget for custodial overtime is $115,000. 45 I was talking about was
A reduction?
what we were reducing.
545
545
out of 100.
270. In what, so our overtime budget is basically the 193 offset
Yep.
plus the 115,000 offset. Right now, we have not hit that number, and I don't anticipate us to. We really crack down on the overtime, but it's something that I'm just keeping an eye on.
Okay. Thank you, I'll yield.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Mr. Hockman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a matter of procedure, do we need to receive these documents? I think we need to receive the budget publicly. So I'd make a motion to receive the documents that were delivered to us.
Heard the motion by Mr. Hockman, seconded by Mr. Amico. All in favor? Thank you.
And secondly, I appreciate, I don't know who it would go to. I appreciate the documents that we did receive and the fact that we received them in advance of this meeting. Are we going to receive our typical budget binder with historical information?
Sure. We actually, do you have a historical binder, the historical information? with
Line
you?
item budget?
Yeah.
For FY17 compared to FY18.
Uh,
We have that available tonight,
Okay,
and
no, that's fine. I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure we were getting it. I saw Mr. Stanton working on it for the last few weeks, so I thought we'd be getting it. I just wanted to make sure. With regard to the budget itself, I'll speak on that, or the proposed cuts, proposed budget, whatever we want to call it at this point. Firstly, I appreciate the position that the mayor has put forth and the constraints that exist, the real constraints that exist due to certain expenditures that some of which are beyond our control and some of which are within our control. Be that as it may, I'll just come out as matter-of-factly as I can about this. And I'll start with the reductions in the teaching positions that are being proposed, not by choice. I realize that. We all realize that we need to find some room somewhere. I will not support a budget that has kindergarten paras cut, whether they're cut completely or by 50%. I think the formative years that our students have are the most important. We all know that. We know the data supports that, and we know the hard work that these paras perform. We'll find that money somewhere. The 10 special education paras, I'm happy to hear what Dr. Levine is talking about regarding co-teaching. It's something I think that we're going to need to flesh out quite a bit more before I become comfortable dealing with IEPs and requirements under IEPs and how we have to rewrite those IEPs and a lot of things like that. I do have some information on the co-teaching model. It's something I've read about for a few years now. I've talked to some people about it, and it's something I think can work if there's buy-in. I don't know I don't know all the day-to-day maneuvering that's been taking place, so it's something that I'd like to talk about at some point. I'll just go through each item and then we can talk about them. I will not support a grade 3 reduction in teachers at the Brown. I will not support the grade 2, 3, or 4 reduction of teachers at the Carroll. I will not support a grade 2 or 5 reduction in teachers at the Center. I will not support a grade 4 reduction in teaching at the Welch. I will not support a reduction in the assistant principal at the Carroll. I think all of those need to be revisited. We can't take teachers away from children. The most important positions we have in the school department, respectfully to everybody else, are teachers in front of classrooms. On the other budget reduction considerations, I'd like at some point, and maybe tonight's not the meeting for it because it's the initial budget meeting, and I purposefully made my comments on the staff reduction requests because I wanted to be out there in the front right at the beginning. I don't understand how, even with the explanation Dr. Levine provided Ms. Carpenter with regard to substitutes, to level fund that. It's a problem that we've had in the district for a while. We've also just voted on an increase in substitute pay. It's nickels. It's not a big number, but there was an increase. I don't know how we can level fund something when we just voted to increase the salary structure, even though it's small amounts. Health insurance, I don't understand that, particularly in light of the mayor's opening statement regarding a 5.7%. I think he said 5.7%.
7.45%.
Thank you. 7.45% increase. I don't know if that's a function of a reduction in staff members and is dependent upon that. I suspect it is. The transportation, in parentheses, we have 2 new buses. Is that we're foregoing the purchase of 2 new buses?
The leasing of 2 new buses.
Okay. And when we say that's for Peabody Public School buses, not for the contracted services?
That's correct.
Okay. I just had a few more questions, and then I'll... and then, to the extent that you know, Dr. Levine, the $400,000 projected reduction in special education tuitions, is that as a result of students not being or being serviced within the district as opposed to receiving services outside the district?
Through the chair, it's through a combination of a reduction in students going out and the good budgeting strategies by our new director of special education, along with Jared, the business manager. So yes, the answer to that is a combination of things, but certainly fewer students going out and more students coming back.
So at first blush, those are my thoughts. I expect that we'll have a lot more information coming, certainly tonight, with a full budget binder and an opportunity to look at different lines that, and I appreciate the hard work that everybody put into formulating this summary, as well as the potential cuts that are before us. And I don't mean to demean or belittle anybody. It's a difficult document to look at. I'm sure it was a difficult document to draft. We all, I think, share philosophy when it comes to most of the things that exist within the school department. So I didn't mean to come off too harsh, but I'm hoping that once we get the full budget binder, we can become a little more creative in terms of where we can look to make reductions.
Through the chair, if I may, to your point regarding co-teaching, we're pretty far down the road on that. And at the next meeting, next Tuesday night, I will have Ruthie here to answer questions about the technical aspects of co-teaching and why it demands fewer paraprofessionals.
And that's great to hear, because I'm a fan of it. I think it works. I think it benefits students. I think it benefits teachers. So I'm glad to hear. I didn't realize that we were that far down the road and prepared to implement it. And so I'm happy to hear that. And if that's the case, that would make me more comfortable supporting at least that budget line.
Thank you. Mr. Miko?
Mr. Mayor, through the chair of the committee, I agree with Ms. Carpenter on the K-Paras. If there's any way we could maybe reduce those cuts to half. For many of these kids, this is the first time they're walking into a school building, especially if they don't have pre-K ahead of time or go to a preschool. This is the very first time, and to put a teacher in that position to have 20, 22 kids in a classroom without that help, that's just a very difficult thing to swallow. On that note, I'm concerned about elementary cuts across the board. In education down the road, when students don't succeed, you look back and you say, where were the educational gaps? Were they a transient student? What did things happen in first, second, or third grade that they didn't get what they should have received in terms of an education? And I just feel we have to do whatever we can do to keep those teachers in those classrooms, to keep those numbers as small as we can in terms of classroom sizes. I look at the Carroll School with 640 students. That's very concerning to me. So on that note, I just said I'm very concerned about the elementary cuts across the board. I would ask this committee and this group here to do whatever we can do when we add the numbers up to keep those teachers in place, and those positions in place, especially at the Carroll Center in Welch, where those are our more transient schools, and our numbers can go up. They can come down, but chances are, I mean, Peabody is a place where people want to move to, and I think numbers are going to go up, and that's very concerning to me. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rosino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair to Dr. Levine and to Kara and to Jared, thank you very much for this document. I appreciate it. But I think looking at it is actually kind of like looking at it in a vacuum, considering we don't have the budget book to kind of go through line by line and figure out what may be a little bit more palatable to swallow than some of these cuts. I don't want to be redundant, but to you, Dr. Levine, on one of your points, you said you had mentioned possibly moving administration from the Kylie to a potential other place. I don't see that anywhere on here, because that's not going to be free if we, and through the chair to the chair. Is that something that you envision this coming school year, or is that something you envision following?
Is that directed to me? Yes, we will, our school administration will not be at the Kylie School come September. We'll be relocating. We're working on now a potential location, working on a lease agreement that will be presented to the City Council, hopefully at the next City Council meeting. And there are some moving costs, but my understanding is those costs are in this budget. Moving costs and lease, the cost for a lease agreement.
Okay. So that just kind of proves my point. I'm not even going to comment on these without seeing a full packet of everything that we're expending money on and what potentially may be an overvalued line item that we might be able to reduce as opposed to teachers in classrooms. Thank you.
Mr. Olympio?
Through the chair. Thank you for putting this together. Appreciate that. Just, and again, I'm not going to be redundant. I think some of my fellow committee members said the same thing. I think I would need to see more detail, especially with the top items there, the $1.2 million budget reductions, because, again, substitutes, health insurance reduction, I need to see more of the numbers. But on the reductions, just to be clear, these are all open positions? You said there would be no...
Not all.
Not all.
Most.
Okay, most. And is there a component, again, it's not a huge amount, but on $1.8 million, the payroll taxes are about $30,000 on 1/8. Is that factored in these reductions? Because, again, if we were just even to take the 1/8, that's $30,000 pickup right there.
Yes.
Oh, it's factored in. Okay.
And health insurance is factored in as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all of you for preparing these documents. I have a question regarding the reduction of kindergarten paras. My understanding throughout the entire time I've been a school committee member is the reason our kindergarten program is so successful is because we utilize paraprofessionals to help in those classrooms. I do understand that at the state level, cutting the kindergarten grant was going to hurt us. But will we lose our NIAC accreditation for our kindergartens if we diminish our program by a wholesale, complete and total elimination of paraprofessionals in the kindergartens?
Through the chair. I don't think we would lose it. I think that it would be more difficult to retain it as teachers get used to not having a second pair of eyes in the classroom. To be clear for the public, we're talking about 24 people at 15 hours a week.
Okay. If I could, I'd like to follow up with a question. When we get the big budget document, will we have the projected enrollment numbers in that as well? Okay.
Yes.
Because I thought we were seeing an uptick in kindergarten enrollments, and with special recognition of Mrs. Murphy, I hope she buys lottery tickets because she's usually spot on with those numbers. Are we going to have an increase in kindergarten students next year?
Through the chair, I don't think we know that number yet, but we will try to have that number for you in the complete budget document.
Okay.
Now, we do have the 17-18 comparison, if you would like that by line item. We do have that now. You want to pass that out?
Motion to receive.
Second.
All in favor, it's a vote.
One other question, and I do apologize, you may have already spoken to this. Do we have any idea about the 9C cuts that are going to come? Has anything come down yet on those? Okay. Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to just ask a couple of other questions. On the reduction of the teacher positions at the high school, if, Dr. Levine, if you could explain those again, is it through the reduction in students? Is there some consolidation going on up there?
Yes. We've gone from about 1,850 students in 2011, mostly due to the opening of the vocational school. We'll probably open at about 1,530 in September of 17. We also have two very healthy programs in the PANS program and the PLA, so 45 of those students aren't on site during the day as it is now. So it's really about 1,500 students that walk the corridors. That's almost a full class of kids. So the five, I think, is a conservative approach at this point. We have had to take a look at, I know something about high school scheduling, having been around high schools all my life. And as we take a look at the numbers, I don't think that we're going to hurt the programming as much as being able to combine classes and have healthier numbers in classes, but not lose programming.
Actually, that was my follow-up question as to whether it's going to increase class sizes in specific courses. How will that play out?
It will not increase class sizes in the courses that are typically low because of the way those classes are constructed. In some of the electives, it may increase class sizes, but we've been fairly low in those numbers, so I don't think that we'll be increasing class sizes to the point of anybody worrying about the danger of it not being academically okay. Mm-hmm. If that took place, I would come back to this table.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Mr. Olympio?
Through the chair. On the spreadsheet that we got in our packet, there was three items that kind of jumped out at me. Was the Higgins, the high school, and the administration. And they were all budget increases of over $750,000. What, just the short answer, the...
Raises, I would assume. Raises, step increases?
Yeah, through the chair. Raises, step increases, and for administration, health insurance is in the administration line. So
and the swings and the full-time equivalents, though, aren't that
right, so,
great?
Through the chair. One of the things I did with this budget is I literally went line item by line item. I met with every single principal, and I ran payroll reports. And then I based the system off who was actually in the school. And I wanted to get it 100% accurate. So that's why you have a lot of fluctuations. There's a lot of correcting in the FTEs. Yeah. It says on this piece of paper right now we're up 37 FTEs. That's not 100% accurate, but because of the way that things could have been missed FTE-wise in the FY17 budget that threw these numbers off. Okay. So when you saw the budget summary, basically what that did, it did it by accountable unit, which is the location here in that macro spreadsheet. And it gave every single difference in the general fund for FTEs. So if you're looking at the brown, you can you'll look at the FY17 changes of FTEs compared to what FY18 FTEs are.
Okay. And I assume that the curriculum development, that decreases the science? Is that, it's a decrease of 630,000 roughly?
Yes, so in the 630,000 actually is our auditors wanted us to put the ELL teachers in the location where they are.
Okay.
So that's really offsetting, and it's actually in the budget summary
Okay.
notes. It's offsetting a lot of the big overages, such as the Higgins
Okay.
and all the other schools that you're seeing.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Carpenter?
You all set, John? So just a couple of, to echo about the class sizes. I know it's difficult, and I also know that luckily enough, we can't go over a certain number contractually. So if anything should happen, it's very fluid, and a teacher will be added, regardless of what we reduce at this budget. Some of them are very concerning, a couple of them that reach the 26, the high 20s. But overall, we all know contractually they're not going to go over no matter what we vote. I do have a concern about the kindergarten paras. I think from what I'm hearing from a lot of committee members and from myself is we like the big book. We like to look back at the 15, 16, 17 as much as we can, and then we kind of like to pick it apart a little bit and see where we can tweak things and maybe save some of these items on here. So I'm not really sure how much further we're going to get, but would we be able to have that more than just this line item? Would you have the bigger book ready by next week?
Through the chair, absolutely. I was just waiting to get really a finalized.
Yep.
The one thing that I'm just continuing to work on is the enrollment projections. But I can definitely, I think I can have that together by end of business on Friday.
Great, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair, if I could, we'll try to have those books delivered by Friday. So sometime on Friday, we'll try to have those delivered to you. And we were a little late this year, as you know, by about 2 months, in developing this budget because it is such a difficult and challenging year for everybody, including the mayor. So we apologize for those numbers getting to you late and for the 5-year look back or 4-year look back not being ready for tonight. But to be fair to Jared, we've all been under the gun, and this was the best we could produce at this particular time.
Mrs. Dunn, did you have a question?
I had two.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll let you ask 3.
I'll go for 3. I know, just in general, tonight, we're not, going line by line, but I do want to say that looking at the enrollment and the reductions that are proposed at the elementary level, there are a couple of reductions here that are going to put the classes very, very close to the outer limit of the amount of students we allow in. Really, the only one that's not going to have any difference is at the Burke. And that's because of reduction in students. You'll go from 20 students per 5th grade to 20 students per 5th grade. There's no change there at all. That's honestly the only one I can support. When I look at the Carroll School in the 4th grade, to go from 21 students to 26 students per classroom is going to be really such a difficult movement at that school, especially because those kids are coming up each year being in a maxed out classroom under this. You'll have grade 2, you'll have 22 kids per class. Then grade 3, they'll go to 25 students per class. Then in grade 4, they're going to have 26 students per class. And at 26, you're maxed out. Anybody moves into the Carroll district, they're not going to be able to go to that school. And so I think that one of the things that really bothers me about the reductions at the elementary level is the impact on the students' experience in school, because those are really, they are their formative years. We have to make sure that we're able to give them the attention that they need because of all of the state requirements with the MCAS exams and all those other evaluations that take place. And I honestly think that to do this, we would be setting those students up for future difficulties. And I know anything we do in any building or any level of the school system affects the whole system. There's very few isolated things that you can do that aren't going to impact somewhere else. But I really think that the reduction at the elementary level is going to impact greatly as those students go forward. So just giving you fair warning, I'll need a lot longer to argue about it next week. The second question was about the reduction of the 2 guidance counselors at the high school level. Again, I can understand it with the reduction of the student population at the school, but I would actually like to ask if, in that discussion, if there was any chance of making sure that we could at least try to have someone who is trained in occupational guidance. Right now, our guidance counselors are there, and their focus does seem to be primarily on college preparation. We have a lot of students that need to go into jobs and want to go into jobs, and they need some occupational guidance in that. So I don't know if that is something that could be done when you're changing guidance at that level, but I would like to know if we could at least look into that. Thank you.
Through the chair, if I could. I just want to clarify one thing. The total reduction in guidance will be 1. The layoff is 2. And then my expectation is to put back at the bottom a K through 12 guidance coordinator who would be housed at the high school, would articulate guidance K through 12, and would evaluate guidance counselors. So they would also have a reduced number of students that they're responsible for. And we have talked at the central office table about trying to have a vocational guidance counselor at the high school who understands vocational schools, and kids who need a vocational will be going for either a job or would like some sort of occupational background as well. So the total reduction in this plan would be 1. If you direct that neither, for example, the academic dean or director of curriculum and instruction or the K through 12 guidance person is in the cards, and you want me to use that money elsewhere, we would probably reduce the guidance department by 1 and leave it at that, because we don't want to reduce so much that the rest of the guidance counselors are stretched in servicing the kids. So that's really the answer to your question.
Okay.
Yes, we're very strongly considering some sort of vocational background.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, just a follow-up on that. Are our guidance counselors presently at or exceeding the recommended level of I'll say caseload? I always understood they were.
Through the chair, I think the recommended level is 250 to 275 for guidance counselor at the high school level. Mm-hmm. I think we have 7 guidance counselors. I think we're right at 250. Mm-hmm. This would increase the number. My plan would increase the number, but not by so much that we would be either out of compliance or too far out of compliance mm-hmm. with that number. And that's a recommended number. It's not a number that every
right.
school meets.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Mr. Hockman?
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up, a few follow-ups on Ms. Dunn's questions regarding guidance. So with the proposed budget, or the proposed changes, Dr. Levine, if you got both sides of it, right, the cut not that you get both sides of it, but if we were to adopt both sides of what you're suggesting here, the delta would be $60,000, not, right, because it would be a reduction of $160 for the 2 guidance counselors and an increase of $100 for the K through 12 coordinator.
That's correct.
The delta 60, and alternatively, as you just laid out, if we didn't opt in for the district-wide guidance coordinator, you would reduce your reduction to 1 guidance counselor instead of 2, so it'd be a delta of 40. It
would be, Yeah, it would be.
Well, it'd be a
it would
reduction of
no, it would be
80.
we would leave the department head at $4,500 in the budget, reduce one guidance counselor, so the delta
So
would
it'd
be
be 76.5,
80.
or
somewhere around
75.5.
80.
Yeah, okay. And I guess at this point, since do you have the ability to express a preference on that at this point? Or is it too early in the process?
No, I need to explain the way I feel about these things. I think they're both critically important. One is critically important to the health and welfare of the high school and district-wide curriculum and instruction, and to my colleagues sitting next to me. We can't continue to assume that she's going to continue to do what she does without help. We haven't even mentioned grants. So, and grants are millions of dollars in this district. I mean, it's somewhere around $8 million, I think, $6 or $8 million. We have that number to create, what is it?
Closer to
$3.5 million. To write, manage, and report on those grants is a job kind of all into itself. She does that, along with everything else she does. So I think that that's a critical job, and it becomes even more critical in a year where we're going to be going through the accreditation process at the high school. We are a level 3 high school. We need to be at least a level 2 high school. There is no reason why we're not a level 2 high school. We have kids filtering in from elementary schools and a middle school that's either level 1 or level 2. It makes no sense to me that we're a level 3 high school. So we have a lot of pieces in place right now that we've put in place this year for next year to improve our standing. We're also going to go through the accreditation process, which is a major, major job for our teachers and our administrators at the high school. They're going to be spending huge amounts of time on this. I believe that it's critical that we have an academic dean or a director of curriculum and instruction that focuses on the high school over the next year or two in order to move that high school forward and out of level 3 and into at least level 2. So I'm emotionally attached to that position. However, I've been around now since 2011 to see the inside of the district. And I also believe that even with all the hard work of our guidance department and our talent in the guidance department, it's time to take a second look at the way we do business in the guidance department. And I believe the only way to do that is to have a pair of eyes that can take a look at it from an expert guidance position of administration, somebody who evaluates guidance counselors, someone to whom guidance counselors are responsible. I believe that there are things that we're not doing in the guidance department to service kids that we can be doing, and that's not because of refusal or laziness or even lack of talent. I think there needs to be a total vision and maybe even revision of the way things are done there. I think this is a critical piece. And if I had to choose, my legacy walking out the door, it would be the K through 12 guidance administrator. And that's even with Kara pounding me in the back and hating me for the next year or two. I believe that this is a critical job that needs to be looked at for the servicing of our kids across the spectrum for the future.
Thank you. I appreciate your passionate response. And frankly, I expect that from you. You're a passionate person who is thoughtful, and you've allowed some segues into some of my other follow-up questions with your response there. You mentioned a grant writer. I don't see a grant writer in our budget. I haven't seen a grant writer since Ed Feynman, I think, was the last grant writer we had, and I think that was when I was in my second year on this committee. It's been a while. My experience is that grant writers, pay for themselves with the grants that they produce. Perhaps that's something that we should look at and consider funding, whether it be through a salary item or through a percentage of grants. I know we have to be creative with that and careful with how we do that, but perhaps that's something that we benefit from and eases some of the burden that we're potentially facing here. You know, and I know, Dr. Levine, that there's a lot of talented people, a lot of, both at the administrative side and the teaching side, that are working very hard with a corrective action plan at the high school to remedy the status of that school, the MCAS status of that school, currently at level 3. And I fully expect that we will make dramatic improvements there with the hard work that's going on. And it's to that point, and to Mr. Amico's point, that I'm so vehemently opposed to the reductions in the elementary level, because we're gonna work hard as a school district this year, and we did last year too, to raise the level at the high school, and we're gonna succeed. We'll get to level 2, maybe even level 1 status, we all hope, and then to face a population down the road that doesn't have the services that they should have, that they deserve to have, that we know they need to have to succeed as they get older. You can't bang your head against the wall too frequently, otherwise the frustration level becomes so high that how many times can we come back from that? So please, as we continue these discussions, let's be thoughtful of that. I know, like I said earlier, we all care about kids, and we all care about the quality of services they receive. I will point out, maybe this is something we can consider, and maybe it's too dramatic for purposes at this hour, but as Ms. Dunn pointed out, the reductions that were proposed for classroom teachers are all on this side of Route 1. The only reduction for a classroom teacher on the other side of Route 1 is at the Burke School, and it doesn't have any impact on class size. It's merely a function of enrollment in that grade level. I don't know if it's too late to consider, and I know we've had conversations about it, Dr. Levine, combining grade levels within the 3 West Peabody buildings as opposed to having them serviced. So in other words, have K1 and 2 perhaps in one building, so that we can become more efficient with our services, and instead of having class sizes that are wonderfully low, don't get me wrong, I wish we could do this across the district, and we don't have the class sizes now, so I don't want to start quoting numbers, but when we look at as Ms. Dunn pointed out, a grade 4 class at the Carroll, not going from 21 to 26 with the proposal, we're not only talking about 26 students, and by the way, Principals Alfanos and Smith are with us tonight. Thank you for being here, as well as Councilors Turco and Sasla. But I bet you if I asked, and I don't want to put her on the spot, but if I asked Principal Smith how many of those kids going from 3rd grade to 4th grade, the 104 of them are ESL students. How many of them are on IEPs? We're not, it's a complicated business we're in. It's a difficult business, and teachers do a great job with the resources they have. It's difficult to further reduce those resources. So I've said enough for tonight, but we'll get to it, and we have some work ahead of us, and we do have some constraints with time, because I think we need to get a budget to the City Council early June. I almost feel like Nancy Pelosi here. I don't want to shut down the Peabody School Department. We don't want to shut down the Peabody School Department. We have to get the work done, and we will. So thank you.
If I may, just through the chair, just a very quick comment. Most of you have known me for quite some time, and you know that I'd rather chew my arm off than lay off a teacher. And I had to give you something. So these conversations are productive, and I knew they would be. But there's only so much I can do with the money that we have. So just, I know that I can help classrooms over the summer, as I have done in the past, as numbers increase or demographics change. So just keep that in mind as we're discussing.
Mr. Rosino?
Thank you. First, I just want to say, Dr. Levine, thank you for your impassioned explanation of the guidance line cut. The reduction, even though it's monetarily, you're looking at it district-wide as almost a gain in your vision as far as how it will help students. So I think, at least in my mind, that's one of the only direct student cuts that I can support, knowing that you're looking at, even though we're losing a staff member, we're not losing services to kids. We're really looking at the way we look at things and changing that more as a district level. So I appreciate that. And I'm just going to bounce around a little bit without having the budget book and going through everything the way I'd like. Looking at the line item budget draft, I know that under athletics, and this may go to Mr. Olympio's point earlier, it looks like you're up staffing by 0.5 FTEs, but in the projection, you're minusing a Higgins phys ed teacher. So how are we going up a staff member?
Through the chair. So some of the gym teachers are budgeted by location. So in this particular sentence, the 0.5 reduction or increase. So in FY17 this year, whether it was through the budget or through payroll, I'm showing that we're up 0.5 health teachers. So that 0.5 health teacher carried into FY18's budget.
So it's not necessarily, I'm sorry, through the chair, so it's not necessarily an increase of 0.5 FTE, it's actually what we're already doing
It's
currently.
really where we are. And I don't really have much history, so this year sort of stands by itself. I'm making corrections to the FY17 budget to match 18.
Can we have a list, I'm sorry, through the chair, can we have a list of all of those expenditures that are different than what you understood them as compared to what they actually are? A complete list of all of them.
Through the chair. So I can get very close. As I've said all year, the way that our payroll system works and our general ledger, they don't talk.
No, because
So
everything's antiquated.
what I have to do and what I'm working on for an end-of-year projection is I have to run a report and I have to see what we've expended by line item per person. And then I have to take the units, how many pay periods they have left, and times it by their biweekly rate, which is the only number I'm really given in our payroll system, and then either subtract that or increase that to the amount that's left. So I can have a very, I can have something within close.
Within reason, that's fine.
But as you see on, say you're looking at the athletics budget summary, I do give an amount of what we budgeted for the payroll in, say, FY17 and where we are right now. So in athletics, we budgeted payroll for $731,094. I'm projecting our expenditures to be $771,822. So right now, in athletics, we'd be short $47,28. Those numbers won't really fluctuate from what I can give you, though.
Okay. 'Cause through the chair, one of my, I'll say frustrations over a few years past was we would make agonizing cuts or changes that we expected to see, but they never kind of came to fruition, in at least, I'll speak for myself, in my expectations. So it would be good to see what we have budgeted, what we're expecting that FTE line to be, and then what it actually is. And I know, for instance, a couple of years ago, for some reason, there was an influx in paraprofessionals that we hired, a great deal of them compared to what we had initially budgeted for. And there was never really an explanation to at least this board of how that influx occurred and where they were distributed. So if we could have a really good handle on what our expenditures are versus what our thought they were going to be, that'd be fantastic. Thanks.
And then one quick clarification through the chair. So one of the things that we do, Dr. Levine mentioned that we have roughly 3.8, it's actually 3.8 million in grants. 3.5 is from federal, a little over 250,000 is state. What myself and the grant managers are doing this year is we're really stripping them apart and budgeting, really budgeting them accurately. So when I did the FY18 budget, I know which paras, which administrators.
Are coming out of what line
are
item?
coming out of each.
Perfect. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Amico?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to Mrs. Stanton or Dr. Levine. In that research, could you also look at Title I and where we stand at each building? And just want to get a gauge on where we are there.
Can you clarify that a little bit?
Basically, some buildings fall short in Title I funding. Could we see where we're at in each building?
Sure. So what I can give you through the chair is I can give you just who's budgeted from the location to the Title I grant.
Sure.
Because right now, DESI's changing everything, and what they're doing is they're requiring us to actually put the location of the para in the grant line. Right now, the way that we have it, it's one grant line, say for paras. So if they're at the Burke, they're in this line. If they're at the Carroll, they're in this line. So I have to separate it with the help of Ms. Murtagh as to who's where.
Through the chair, we can give you what the minimum percentage is at each school and whether or not we fall short at each school or go over at each school and why.
Great, thank you.
On that point,
Mr. Os, you all set, Mr. Amico?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Osgood?
on that point with the Title I grant, it doesn't expand as more schools become Title I eligible.
That's right.
Right. So, unfortunately, the process is they're going to give us a set money regardless of how many schools we currently have as Title I.
That's
Right.
exactly correct.
Thank you.
Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering if we could have, poor Mr. Stanton, I'm going to throw more work on him. On the transportation, if we could have information as far as what the current cost is and what we currently bring in from transportation payments versus what it would be if we were to only do the state-required minimum. We provide better transportation. If we could have that type of a comparison. And then the second one, and actually I know Mr. Stanton is working on this for the subcommittee information, but on the rental of facilities, if we could see what we take in currently, and we need to look at those costs and what we charge to see if we do need to go up on those costs and what we might possibly realize for next year as far as being able to offset some of the costs of education too. Okay, thank you.
Jared's going to be very busy tomorrow.
I know.
Mr. Olympio?
Through the chair, just a general observation. So I think we're all in agreement that we're very reluctant to cut anything that relates directly to the classrooms with teachers and paras. I'm just doing my quick math. I mean, if we kept everything the way it is, I mean, we're looking at that we have to come up with about $1.4 million. So one of those books are coming Friday because that's a lot of money, and we're going to have a lot of tough decisions to make. And just doing some quick math, so we're looking at $1.4 million that we got to come up with if we want to keep everything as is.
Well, thank you, Mr. Olympio, because that's what the comment I was going to make. I mean, you know, I certainly am in agreement, and it's very easy for all of us to say that I'm not going to support a budget that doesn't, you know, make some cuts here. That's the easy comment to make. We got difficult work ahead of us. 1.4 million is not going to happen. Right. That is would be a significant increase to taxes, and we're already putting forward, and I know we disagree with this every year, but I stand by it. You add in the $600,000 that goes to the Essex Tech, that's an increase. It's a $2.1 million increase that we're already making. So the $1.4 million is not going to happen, so we're going to have to make some very difficult decisions over the next few weeks, or next couple weeks. Mr. Rosignol?
I'm sorry, how much of the increase was going to the vote?
$600,000.
Thank you.
That's the 77 students that are going to the vote that accounts for that increase. And that doesn't include the money that we pay for the building itself. So, that's a disagreement we have every year. I do think it's a school budget number. I know you don't disagree, you disagree. I couldn't disagree more, Mrs. Dunn. To me, it's a school number. Anybody, have any comments? Anybody else have any comments? Okay. Oh, sorry, Mr. Miko.
Through the chair to Dr. Levine, and actually the committee, I guess now we know why there's such a critical shortage in superintendents across the state, across the country. I mean, you have an incredible, difficult job, and I respect you for all you do and everything that you've given us, and so thank you. And we're going to work together, and we're going to do what's best for Peabody and our kids, so thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right.
Motion
to recess till,
Budget
I know we have a
meeting.
budget meeting scheduled for June 16th, Tuesday, June 16th.
Nope,
Excuse me, May
May.
16th.
I'd love it if it were June 16th.
So just to work backwards before we adjourn, the city council has scheduled Mr. Sassler, the president, to share. I think we've tentatively scheduled the date for June 15th. Not to put you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot. June 15th. So we got a lot of work to do. We may have to schedule additional meetings next week and the week after. Okay, thank you.